All right, welcome to our explainer on Good Clinical Laboratory Practice, or GCLP. Today we're jumping right into Chapter 5, the conduct of the work. And let's be clear, this isn't just about reading rules from a book. This is about what happens in the lab, second by second, where every single action directly impacts the safety of patients and the integrity of a clinical trial.
So, to really make this stick, let's follow a model lab we'll call Apex Labs. They're in the thick of it, analyzing samples for a huge new clinical trial. The numbers they produce, well, those numbers are going to help decide if a new drug is safe and effective. The stakes couldn't be higher.
So the big question is, how do they pull this off? How does a lab like Apex make sure every single analysis is spot on every single time? It's not magic, and it's not just about hiring smart people. It's about a rock-solid, documented system that guides every single thing they do. Let's see how it works. Okay, first things first. At Apex Labs, the work doesn't start when a sample arrives. No, it starts way, way before that. It all begins with a plan, an airtight, comprehensive plan. You see, everything they do is built on two key documents. First, you've got the clinical trial protocol that comes from the sponsor. That's the big picture. But that's not enough for the lab team. They create their own much more detailed document, the analytical plan. Think of this as their day-to-day playbook. Let me put it this way. The protocol might say measure biomarker X, but the analytical plan tells you exactly how. It spells out the validated method they're going to use, the specific criteria for a sample to even be considered acceptable, who to call when things go wrong, and exactly when reports are due. It's the lab's operational blueprint, and it's locked in with the sponsor before a single sample gets touched. All right, so the plan is in place. Now let's follow a sample as it comes through the door. From the moment it's received to the second it's put in storage, every single step is dictated by procedures. And all those procedures are there to protect one thing, the integrity of that sample. So let's play out a scenario. Imagine this. A courier drops off a box. The technician at Apex Labs opens it up, and inside there's a tube, but the label is smudged. They can't be 100% sure whose sample this is. What they do next is what separates a compliant lab from a liability. And here is the absolute key takeaway. The technician does not guess. They don't even think about running the test. The first step is always to stop. That sample gets immediately put in quarantine, totally separate from the main workflow. Then they get on the phone to the clinical site to figure it out. And you better believe every single one of these steps is documented. Why? Because if you analyze an unknown sample, you've just generated useless data and you've potentially compromised the entire trial. Okay, let's throw another curveball at them. What if the label is crystal clear, but it has too much information, like the patient's full name and date of birth? Now, this isn't an integrity problem. This is a massive breach of confidentiality. You know, the guiding principles of good clinical practice, or ICH-GCP, are really clear on this. Every patient has a right to privacy, period. So Apex Labs has to act fast. Their procedure is to carefully cover up that personal info, but without hiding other important identifiers. They might even give it a new internal lab ID. And this is crucial. They report the mistake to the sponsor so the clinical site can fix their process and make sure it never happens again.
So once a sample is properly identified and checked in, it goes into storage. But in a GLCP lab, this isn't just about sticking a tube in a freezer and walking away. No way. Storage is an active, ongoing process of protecting that sample stability right up until the moment it's needed.
This chart shows you exactly what I mean. See here? Apex Labs has a set point. That's the perfect temperature for their freezer. But they also have an action limit. If the actual temperature ever crosses that line, alarms go off and a whole corrective action plan kicks into gear immediately. Every temperature check, every little drift, every action taken, it's all logged, creating a perfect, unbroken record. All right, we've got the plan, we've got the samples safely handled. Now for the main event, the analysis itself. This is where the rubber meets the road, and where we have to make sure the data we generate is accurate, reliable, and totally defensible if an auditor comes knocking. The number one rule at Apex Labs is simple. You never, ever perform an analysis using a technique that hasn't been proven. Every single test uses what's called a validated method. All that means is that the lab has already gathered hard evidence proving that the test works like it's supposed to, is reliable, and has super clear rules for what counts as a pass or a fail. And data integrity means being honest, even about mistakes. Let's say a technician writes down the wrong number. The The wrong way to fix it, the way that gets you in huge trouble during an audit, is to grab the whiteout or scribble over it. That just looks like you're hiding something. The Apex Labs way? You draw one clean line through the air, write the correct value next to it, and then you initial and date it. The original mistake has to stay readable, always.
Now, before we go any further, we have to talk about the single most important idea that underpins all of this. This quote from ICH GCP, well, it's the ethical North Star for all clinical research. It means the person, the patient, the trial subject, they come first, always, no exceptions.
So what does that look like in the real world for Apex Labs? Well, it means that if a doctor at the clinical site calls in a panic and needs an urgent, unscheduled test run on a sample because their patient is not doing well, you do that test. Patient safety blows all the usual red tape right out of the water. The lab absolutely must have a documented process to handle exactly these kinds of high-pressure situations.
Let's be real for a second. No person and no lab is perfect. Things will go wrong. Deviations are going to happen. A truly compliant lab isn't one that never makes a mistake. It's a lab that has a solid system for catching those mistakes, figuring out what they mean, and documenting everything with total transparency.
At Apex, they have two clear paths for this. If they deviate from the clinical protocol, boom, they notify the sponsor right away. The sponsor is the one who decides how serious it is. But if they deviate from one of their own internal SOPs, they first investigate the impact themselves. They only loop in the sponsor if it could possibly affect the data or a patient's safety. Either way, everything gets written down.
And finally, we've reached the end of the journey, reporting the results. And this isn't just about sending an email with a number in it. The exact format of the report, how it's delivered, and the deadline, all of that was decided way back in the beginning in that analytical plan. The lab's final job is to deliver that complete, accurate data exactly the way they promised.
So, as we've seen with Apex Labs, every single sample that comes through the door tells a story. It's the story of a trial participant, a real person. Everything we've talked about in the conduct of the work is really about one thing: creating a fortress of procedures to protect the truth of that story. So the real question you need to ask is this: is your process built to be the guardian of that story?